Okay, good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, depending on whenever you decide to watch this video. Welcome to the first session for our geography component in your social sciences course. The module we are working on is the nature. So it's resource and environmental management. So the session we are looking at is an introductory session really to the module. So we are looking at the nature of environmental geography. Now, why did we decide to take this approach? Of course, Vets decided on doing it a totally different way, but we are employing this way so that you know how to think about the work, which is what I really care about. Be able to think about the work and be able to also teach it yourself. So I will, of course, address how is environmental geography supposed to be taught in its nature for your own professional development as teachers. So without wasting any time, let's just look at a session outline for today. So we are going to be looking at a course and module breakdown for starters so that we know what is expected from us in this particular module. And I also want us to look at what you should really focus on as we are studying environmental and resource geography. And then we will then look at an inquiry into resources. What are they? What types of resources do we have? How do we define them and distinguish them or categorize them? Then we're also going to look at something that you should have come across with as you were prescribed Covell's 2007 reading on the ecological crisis. So we'll be looking at what is the ecological crisis and what is environmental management, and we'll then look at how do people actually govern the environment. How are you affiliated as a teacher to that? And since we are teachers, really, we care about the historical development of the knowledge into how resources and the environment is managed. So look at the evolution of an understanding of nature over time. And we'll also think about the different world views to managing resources and the environment. And then last and most and not least, of course, is looking at since we know the world views, what approaches have been coiled or employed in the management of resources and the environment. Okay, and then at the end, I am gonna just address some administrative announcements, and I will see you guys, of course, in the session that we have on Tuesday, the 8th of March, 2022. Okay, for the 2022 goal. If you are in 2023, yeah, I will see you guys on the 9th of March 2023, depending on when you decide to watch this. Okay, so this is a course breakdown to the stuff we are looking at in this social science course. As I said, it is divided into two components. We have a geography component that's going to run from block 1 to 2, and we also have a history component that runs from block 2 to 4. Ne? Okay, now in the geography component, we have two modules. We have resource environmental science module or environmental management module, which runs in block 1, week 1 to 5. It's only 5 weeks. And we also have the introduction to earth sciences module, which runs from block 1, week 6 and 7, block 2, week 1 to 3, which is gonna make again a total of 5 weeks. And then the history component will start in block 2. It has the modules debating ancient African civilizations, which will run from block 2, week 4 to week 6, or week 5, depending on when we decide to start your mock examinations. And again in block 3, week 7, you're gonna have the last week for the module, so which will give us again a total of 5 weeks, if not 4. And then the last module for the year under the history component will be the Unthinkable Freedoms module, where we'll be looking at Haitian and French Revolution, which will all be in block 4. Of course, the module is gonna take roughly 5 weeks, again with the last 2 weeks of the block being used for your final mock examinations. So please familiarize yourself with the course breakdown. The Wits University will also be using the same course breakdown, so just take note of that. Okay, and then focusing on the module we are really studying now, it's Resource Environmental Management module. You are expected to look at your course guide. So it is found on Umthombo Ulwazi or Edmodo, and it is found under the folders tab, Geography Component folder or subfolder, and in the week. Okay, where you find the different weeks, yeah, that's where you're gonna find the module breakdown. So just take note of it, and yeah, find it there. You see the instructions with regards to what you should know for this particular module. Okay, now looking at the work for the 5 weeks. In week 1, which is this week, we'll be looking at the nature of geography, specifically nature of environmental geography. We'll be looking at an introduction to resource and environmental management, and that section will be instructed by me, Mr. Mbuyisa. And the assessment for this week is a quiz, of course, that has been made available for you guys. In week 2, you have free market environmentalism and conservation. So we'll be looking at the approaches at managing environmental resources. So we'll be looking at what is FME and what is environmental conservation, EC, abbreviated as such. The assessment for week 2 will be a mini essay. So you have to write actually 2 mini essays, one on free market environmentalism, the other on conservation. You have to make reference to the readings that will be found on the week 2 folder for that, on free market environmentalism and conservation respectively. Make sure you attend the session, of course, where we'll be addressing the work with regards to that. In week 3, which will be following week 2, we'll be looking at environmental justice as an approach to the management of environmental resources. Again, the assessment there will be a mini essay. Week 4, we'll be looking at sustainable development, and also looking at how do you apply the different approaches in managing environmental resources. And of course, you are going to be with Ms. Dembata for this particular section. It's not Ms. Mbata, sorry, it's Ms. Dembata. So you're going to be Ms. Dembata with Ms. Dembata. And we are going to communicate if there are any changes with regards to instructors, of course, for the module. But for 2022, it is Mr. Mbuyisa and Mr. Mbata taking care of the module. If there are any changes in 2023, that will be communicated via an email. Okay, and then the submission of the VETS block assignment will be done in week 4. So you may write a test or you submit your VETS assignment depending on what we decide on as a team. And then in week 5, we are going to be doing an explicit pedagogical session. And at the end of every module, we are going to have these special sessions. They are PSI classified sessions that we will have with you in developing you to be astounding educators for our nation, of course. So the theme for that week is global warming and climate change redress, your role as a pedagogical practitioner in their redress. We'll be looking at what is your role in global warming and climate change education. How do you approach that? So we'll have a special joint session by myself, Mr. Mbuyisa and Mr. Mbata, and we'll be looking at that particular section. And of course, you have a very nice applicational assessment entitled Developing 21st Century Geography Educators Assignment 1. So please be on the lookout for that. And then in week 6 and 7, as I said, we'll be starting Introduction to Earth Sciences. So we'll have that, and then it will be the end of the block. So as I said, just to re-emphasize, you find all of the readings in the modules folder as follows: Umthombo Wolwazi, folders, geography component, and then you select the week you are looking reading for. Week 1 is posted already, week 2 is also there already, so find it there. Okay, then looking at the session outline again, so we've addressed course and module breakdown. Let's get to the work itself. So without wasting time, let's just look at number 2 to number 10. Okay, so as I said, the section says studying environmental and resource geography. I want us to just think about resources and environmental management. Just pause the video and maybe have a free write for 5 minutes and write anything you think you can mention about resources and the environment. After pausing the video and writing on that, you can continue then watching the session. Okay, so I hope you have done that. Now, resources and environmental studies, of course, are one of the most provocative sections of the geography curriculum. What do I mean by that? It simply means that there is no way that you can study the section in a scripted section, in a scripted manner. You have to think outside the box when you look at this particular section. So you have to apply a sense of being inquisitive when you are looking at this section of work. You need to ask questions. What are resources? What is the environment? Why do I have to study it? Why is there even a study on that? And what is the best way really to approach this section of work? So these are some of the sections you need to think about. So as an educator, of course, you need to approach this particular section in a manner that ensures that your learners actively think and relate themselves to the content, because all of us use these resources, all of us live in the environment, and that's why we study it. We study how it is managed. So for you as an educator to be able to do that, I think now inquiry-based teaching and learning approach is the most relevant approach you can use. So now, why is it important? It's important first for you as a pre-service teacher. So that's the first thing. It's important for you as a pre-service teacher to understand the complexities of the section. Of course, it may strike a person as a very simple section, straightforward, but we need to critically engage with the work we are looking at. But for us to then apply inquiry-based learning, I think we have to know what it is. So by definition, by Savory there, 2015 page 9, he defines inquiry-based learning as a learning process, and I'm going to highlight the keywords, that engages students. And how does it engage students? It makes real-world connections through exploration of high-level questioning. So what does this mean? Of course, I'll read the rest after. Inquiry-based learning is an approach or a process that's designed to make you practically relate what you are studying to real-world situations, to your experiences as an educator yourself. So that's why this is so important. Now, as a pre-service teacher in training, you have to be able to approach this high-level questioning, because you are expected to assess students in the same manner when you start teaching them, right, in as an in-service teacher. So hence we are teaching you this section using the inquiry-based learning approach, which is also known as the problem-based learning approach. Now, to continue here, it says it's an approach to learning that encourages students to engage, keyword, in problem solving and experiential learning. So you need to relate everything you are learning to your experiences, right? And as I said, the approach is very similar to what we call PBL, which is problem-based learning. Now, what is problem-based learning? It's an instructional and curricular learner-centered approach. So that's what it's what's important about the approach. It makes your approach to the work very largely dependent on you as the student, or dependent on the learner again when you have to use the approach as a teacher in training. So this approach now is learner-centered, and the benefits of it is that it empowers learners to conduct research. Hence, you are given readings every week. We prescribe your readings so that you look for relevant information from the readings. And of course, when you have to do a mini essay, for example, you have to also source out your own readings to try and support some of the information, because the prescribed readings may not always have what you want to say. They may not always support what you're trying to explain or share. Yeah, so again, the approach allows you to integrate theory and practice. So it allows you to take the abstract or the unfamiliar and make it familiar by applying it practically. So you apply the knowledge, you apply the skills. Why? To develop a viable solution to a defined problem. Now, the problem we are defining here is that there is a problem with how we use resources and how we manage the environment. So using the problem-based approach allows you to constantly engage with what are the best ways to manage resources and the environment. So it is more personalized to you in that sense. So this is just you looking at the nature of environmental geography before you actually think about the work itself. Okay. Now, how do we do that then? How do you apply inquiry-based learning? So we use this 5E process, the 5E learning process. The first E is engage. Okay, so what do you do in engage? So as you can see here, it says students are engaged with a challenging situation, and of course they're expected to activate their prior knowledge and ask questions, right? Now, in the engage section, it's basically us saying, okay, what are resources? What do you think resources are? What are resources used for? Where do they come from? They come from the environment. Now, are they managed in an ethically acceptable manner? Are they mismanaged or are they managed? So it's what, of course, we are going to be applying or answering these questions in that session. So you need to engage in that. So think to yourself. It goes back to the free write you did for 5 minutes to say, what do you know about resources? What do you know about the environment? So you share your prior knowledge of the work before you even look at it. So it's very important for you to apply the engage process. The next one is explore. Okay, so now that you know what you know about resources, you better now start thinking about, what don't I know about resources? And you need to explore that. So you need to investigate the phenomenon. So the phenomenon in this case is on resources and the environmental management. So if you are asked again to just take 5 minutes and explore some of the possible solutions that we can employ as humanity to manage environmental resources, you can pause the video, do that for 5 minutes, and then play it again. Okay, so now that we know or we've noted some of the strategies to manage resources and the environment. You can ask yourself, how did I know answers to this? It goes back to prior knowledge. You have a bit of knowledge as to how to do that. But again, you can acknowledge that that prior knowledge was challenged when you had to do this, because you had to really think deep about some of the solutions you can use. And again, guys, when I say pause the video for 5 minutes and write these things down, it helps you to engage with the work. And really think about it. If you don't do it and you cheat your way out of it, it's gonna catch up with you later on, and you'll understand why I'm saying so. In the assessment you will be getting, you're expected to look at, reflect back to some of the responses you gave, of course, on this. And of course, an important thing then is that since in your exploration your ideas may have been challenged, or your prior knowledge may have been challenged, we note that you created some new ideologies. You came up with some of the most innovative ways of managing the environment that have never been thought of before, or that have been thought of before, that you're gonna come across to and relate to, of course, as the session goes on, when you realize that they are actually research proven methods of environment, or of managing the environment and its resources. So just keep those responses, of course, as part of the of your content. And then let's look at the next E. The next E is the explain. That now that you've explored and shared your ideas and they've been challenged and you've created new ones, now you need to now be able to explain the phenomenon, explain how to manage environmental resources. And in the explanation process, that is when your knowledge is challenged, right? You have new knowledge that is gained. Remember, it was challenged in the explore. Now you start gaining new knowledge. Part of the explain process is the session itself that you'll be listening to, or watching and taking notes in the process, where you'll be taught about some of the theoretically proven ways to manage resources and the environment. So we'll be looking at that. And of course, knowledge is gained, and of course we also teach you how to apply the knowledge in some of the most complex ways that are relative to the module itself, of course. And after explaining, you need to elaborate. So one can come and say, man, the 5E method is a bit crazy. Doesn't explain and elaborate mean the same thing? Now you must take note of something. When you elaborate, you are expected to apply your gained knowledge in the explanation in new situations. So that's what elaboration means. It's a bit different from explanation. When you explain, you gain new knowledge and you see how it is applied. In the elaboration section, you are given new situations and you are expected to explain or rather apply the gathered knowledge already, for a more deeper and extended understanding of the work. So you get to deepen your own knowledge. So it will be me basically with the mini essays you have, giving you complex situations and seeing if you are able to apply the knowledge or not. And then the evaluation section, which is the last E, that's where you are expected to reflect on your knowledge and learning process, and it also involves assessment. So when you do the assessment given, you'll be evaluating how much you know the work, how much you can explain it, and most important, can you even teach it to someone else? So those are the 5 E's. As you're going through the work, you need to be able to engage with this complex topic, resource environmental management. Explore, look at what you already know about the topic, and can you propose your own solutions to the problem, since you are using problem-based learning, inquiry-based learning, teaching and learning, of course. And again, you need to explain, look at now, what are the pre-existing theoretical frameworks that explain this particular knowledge, and elaborate. You need to now apply these theories or complex formal knowledge to new situations and be able to perform assessment, of course, in this particular module, in the evaluate section. Okay, now let's apply then what we've just done. An inquiry onto resources. The first question we ask, what are resources? I had asked you to take 5 minutes to write what resources are. So let's just look at what are they. Now, resources, or a resource, is any physical material constituting part of the earth that people need and value. So we get two important things to say. Number one, resources are physical material, and where they found, they are found on earth. Who uses them? It's people. Why do they use them? Because they are of value. See, inquiry-based learning, you ask questions, you engage with their stuff. Okay, and then now we also get to see that since these are physical materials that come from the earth, they can be natural. So they can be natural materials. We say these natural materials, when we put value on them, they become what? They become resources. See, so very important thing to note. And the uses and values of resources change from one culture to the other culture, and from one time to the next, which means if people valued wood in the Stone Age, because they would use it to make tools, we know that in the modern day we depend on copper and iron and alloys to make resources. So you see, from time to time, these two resources have changed their value. So think about it in that way. So natural materials change value with one culture, one generation of people to the other. And of course, again, resources are spatially distributed in varying quantity and quality. So you'll find that some places are densely resourced with copper when they mine and all of that, and some are densely populated with forests, so they have immense trees. Some have nice water bodies and some don't. So they vary, they're distributed in different ways in quantity, which means how much resources do we have, and quality, are they really useful for us in that particular region. Okay, and we also say these resources can become finite. When they're finite, it means they're always there, they are renewable, and some replenish are replenished at varying rates. So it means they can run out. That's what it means. They are non-renewable. Okay, so those are resources. Let's just build upon our understanding on them. So we established that different types then of resources. We have natural resources. Where do we find them? They are obtained from the earth, and they are used to sustain life and meet people's needs on a day-by-day basis. So they are quite central to some of the actions or human activities that we perform. So they're very important, and you see that we have oil, we have coal, we have natural gas, we have metals, stones, sands, and as some of the examples of natural resources. And we also say these natural resources are further branched into either stock resources. Stock resources are also known as non-renewable resources. But now there's a problem with these non-renewable resources. The problem is that they've taken millions of years to form. That's why we say they are finite and can be exhausted, which is why we call them non-renewable, right? And because of that, these stock resources or non-renewable resources may be exploitable over time. And if they are overused, for example, when we overuse these resources such as fossil fuels, we can get to a point where we cannot get them back because they can't be reused. For example, with coal, oil, gas, fossil fuels, you see, now we can't get them back after using them. So we run out of them. So we need to take note of that as well, to say some of these natural resources, even though they come from nature, they are non-renewable, they are stock resources. So they can run out. We also have flow resources. Flow resources are renewable, so these ones are infinite. These infinite resources can be renewed within a short time scale. And how does that happen? It happens through natural physical systems, biotic reproduction, and of course some of these resources are quite in a way dependent on nature's natural processes for them to be renewed. For example, if we fish, remember fish are also an example of flow resources. If we fish these fish, we can run out of them at some point, right? But now, if we do rotated fishing, we can allow for these fish to reproduce and renew themselves, right? So that's why we say they are renewable in that sense. So that's what I mean by that. So flow resources are finite, stock resources are infinite, right? No, it's the other way around. Stock resources are finite, flow resources are infinite, which means you can get them over time. So it's just English playing with me over there. So I hope we understand the difference between the two. Yeah. So I know at high school or at school you were taught about two types of resources, renewable and non-renewable. At varsity we look at things for what they are, not what they appear to be. So we have natural resources broken into two: non-renewable or stock resources, renewable, flow resources. There's a reason why I'm repeating this, so that when we get to later sections, you know what we are looking at. And of course, these resources that are renewable are dependent on ecological processes or natural physical systems, biotic reproduction systems that will enable for them to be reproduced and continuously to be available or flow. Yeah, so think about it. When they say go with the flow, they're just saying go with what's happening. You're always there, you show up. Yeah, so that's what it means. And then examples of natural resources, I'm just gonna emphasize there. We have water. And water is, now think about, you can again pause the video and maybe make a table of some sort and mention all of the resources next to each one. Tell me whether is it a stock resource or is it a flow resource? Is it renewable or is it non-renewable? Yeah, so think about it. Pause the video again, maybe 3 minutes, and write that down. Okay, you can play the video again. Now, we have water. Is water a finite resources or an infinite? Is it a stock resource or a flow resource? I have a student next to me. Let's hear what he thinks.
Yeah, water is infinite.
Okay, water is infinite. Okay. And how is it infinite? What is it dependent on? Which cycle? Ecological cycle?
Precipitation.
Yeah, so yes, it involves that precipitation and all of that, right? Yeah, so we call that cycle the water cycle. Yeah, the water cycle. So we say water is a flow resource. It's renewable because it's dependent on that natural physical system or ecological cycle or natural process known as the water cycle. And then we also have crops. Crops are natural resources. Are they finite or infinite?
Finite. Infinite.
They are infinite. They die out, but they produce seeds, so they can be planted again. Yeah, and it's a whole process over and over again. What about sunlight?
Sunlight is infinite.
Sunlight is also infinite, but scientists say it's getting destroyed, it's running out. Okay, but let's not go there. Yeah, naturally you'll say the sun always comes out. Yeah, it always appears, shows up. Yeah, and then we also have crude oil. Is oil renewable or non-renewable?
Oil is non-renewable.
It's non-renewable, yeah. So it's a fossil fuel. Let's remember that. It's like coal, and oil and gas. So all of these are fossil fuels. They run out. They are non-renewable. They are stock resources. And then we also have wood and gold. Wood comes from trees. But now trees get to run out when we perform something we call deforestation. Too much of a thing, remember, is poison, so that applies here. If we use more than what the earth can replenish, we start getting a problem that we're going to talk about later in the session. And we also have gold. Okay, so just note all of those stuff. So on the side of the screen here, I have a list of natural resources. I have rubber, and I have wood, and I have metal, and I have sand, and I have copper. So those are just some of the natural resources that have been seen as of value to the human lives. And that's what's important. So I hope you understand fully natural resources. Let's look at the next type of resources. The next type of resources are what we call human-made resources. So we have natural resources divided into stock and flow resources, or renewable and non-renewable, or finite or infinite resources. And then we also have human-made resources. Now, human-made resources are also known as capital resources. And these are material riches created by humans, that can be used to get more wealth. Now, examples include money. Money is a resource, factories, roads, technology. Yeah, and we say human beings change their resources into new forms. Like, and how do they do that? They take natural resources to make human-made resources, such as buildings, a bridge, machinery, vehicles. So all of these human-made resources, we can see that they're dependent on natural resources for them to exist, right? And then we also say man-made resources are mostly renewable. And how are they renewable? Through a process we call recycling, right? If I use a can to package a fuzzy drink, or what can I package in a can? Or some canned catfish or something. We know that you can always recycle that can and it's reused again. So most of these resources are renewable. Again, if your car gets into an accident, you can take the car to a scrap yard of some sort, and they just reuse it to produce more cars or other things that may need that metal material, right? Yeah. So again, if your machine is broken, it can be renewed, it can be rebuilt, it can be fixed. Yeah. So that's something about human-made resources. And of course, how are humans able to do this? Remember, they have desired skills, they are intelligent, they have knowledge of how to manipulate technology in order for them to transform the natural resources into usable, valuable things. Yeah, so they take these natural resources and they add value to them, and that's why they become resources. That's what we said earlier on. Yeah, so we call these processed natural resources value added products. So they produce value added products, value added goods, that are capitalized. That's why we call these human made resources capital resources. And they're also known as human resources, of course. So when we add value to these resources, these products are converted into accessible forms of structures that make our life as humans easy. For example, we can look at how coal is converted into electricity. And we say that's a human-made resource. See, yeah, so those are just some of the examples. And of course, we have even more examples, right? Just as you did that other side, just again pause the video and think about how are each of the mentioned resources renewed by humans. How is plastic renewed? How is paper renewed? How is soda renewed? Sheet metal, rubber, and brass. Okay, now we know that with plastic it's recyclable. We can make even more plastic from plastic. So it's a processed product. Paper, again, we take trees, we make paper, and we can take this paper and we make even more cleaner paper and other things. So you can just apply the same with all of the other resources as well. If you look at the list again on the picture here, we have tires, we have a dining table, spoon, clay pots, a statue. All of these are just examples of how humans may take natural resources and turn them or add value to them, and they form them to these fancy things that make our lives easy as human beings. Okay, so those are human-made resources. So remember, we have two types: natural resources that are sub-branched into two. We have stock resources, which are renewable resources. We also have flow resources, which are non-renewable resources, which are infinite, and others are finite. So let's remember those differences. We also have human resources, and we say they're also called capital resources, human resources are also known as human-made resources, capital resources, and we make these resources to create even more wealth. That's why they exist. Okay, so I hope you are fine with the types of resources. Okay, now that we know resources, let's just look at how are they applicable really to our lives. So remember, in the natural resources we talked about rubber. So rubber can be transformed into tires. So you see that humans can take natural resources and make them into man-made resources. Again, we have wood. Wood is, when processed, can form the dining tables and chairs and all of that. Again, when you take metal, you can turn it into a spoon. Makes eating easy, life easy. If you take sand, can make it into clay pots, specifically loam soil. If you take loam soil, you can make it into clay pots. See, if you take copper, natural resource, can make a statue from it. So these are just examples of how natural resources can lead to human-made resources. Yeah, so we have that dualistic relationship in the two types of resources. Okay, we understand the resources. We know the types of resources that we have. We said natural, human-made. But going back to our inquiry-based learning, I think we have to also get why resources. That's the question we need to ask. Why resource and environmental management? Why this section? Yeah, now it takes us to our subtopic there, ecological crisis and environmental management. What does it mean? What does the word resource even mean? Now, as we said, resources originate from the environment, irrespective of whether they are natural or they are man-made. We said human-made resources originate or they are made from natural resources, and we said natural resources come from the environment. Now, let's just get what is the environment then? Should answer that question. Now, the environment is related or is defined as related to what is natural or what is found in nature or what is found in the natural environment. Sounds like the same thing, right? Okay, let's just build up. I'll explain, of course. Now, the environment also, Fagel and Raby defined it as, or referred to it as, elements of soil, water, air, plants, and animals, and their interrelationship with each other and with humans. So that's another definition of the environment. So we're just looking at basically the ecosystem. Yeah, because we look at how do these things relate to each other in relations to humans, right? And one more definition by again Fagel and Raby. They say that environment involves natural elements which have been created by humans, but which may or which we may modify. Remember, human-made resources are modified natural resources. And how do we do that? We do that by exploitation or the introduction of foreign matter. So if you do chemistry, you know that we have this thing we call mixtures. When we mix certain things, we get different products, right? So again, if we decide to mix these natural resources, we may get something else in return. That's what we mean. So the environment is defined as such. So going back to our point, why resource environmental management? We must understand that natural man-made resources are all found in the environment, and we're studying them from the perspective of us really thinking about how does the environment relate to humans, how do animals relate to humans, and vice versa. So we're really looking at that to be specific. Okay, now just to build up on it. So remember, we are looking at the ecological crisis and environmental management. So again, the question, why resource environmental management? Now, why environmental management? Why resource management? Maybe take some time, reflect back on the responses you gave when we started, the first 5 minutes that I said we must take. So you looked at why do we really need to manage resources, manage the environment. And if you did the Covell 2007 reading, and you may have, of course, in your writing reflected on the fact that the environment is slowly deteriorating. And why is it deteriorating? It's deteriorating simply because of the relations that humans have with the environment, right? So it is due to humans making man-made resources. So these relations lead to us making human-made resources. And when we make these human-made resources, we end up depleting natural resources faster than the earth can replenish them. And that's the problem. So we're studying this module because there is sound reason for us to manage resources and the environment. So because humans are not are misusing, if that's an epistemologically acceptable term we can use, they're misusing these resources, or they are overusing these resources. They're using them faster than the environment can replenish them. And now we start getting a problem. And that problem is what we call an ecological crisis. So Covell said that an ecological crisis is at the doorstep, right? And what does it mean? Think about it. When someone is at the doorstep, it means that someone is just a matter of time for that someone enters into the room, right? So the ecological crisis is here. It's with us. And ecological institutions, research institutions have asserted that that is the problem that we are facing right now. And it is of agency for us to take care of our planet before it is too late. And that's why we're studying resource environmental management, because we have a problem with how the environment is managed, how the resources are managed or used, which leads to the ecological crisis that we have to be cognizant of and try to redress or address as members of society. So it's very important for us to do this section. So that's why we're doing this module. So if you look at this picture on the slide here, take the earth as something that is in your hands. So it's all in our hands to hold the earth with care and take care of it and manage our ecology or our environment, because it is going to benefit us in the long term as much as going to destroy us if the environment gets destroyed as well. So it's very important for us to do that. Now, just to build up on the why part, so we have the Red Cross, a very amazing ecological institution, of course. So the Red Cross is sophisticated and knows that there is scarcely such a thing as natural disaster. So the Red Cross, this institution, has asserted that we have a lot of natural disasters, right? And these disasters are something that we need to be cognizant of, be aware of. So the president of the Red Cross, Astrid Heidberg, said that this situation calls for humans, this disaster, ecological crisis, calls for humans or for society and nature to come together. So if I quote for word, he says that everyone is aware of environmental problems that we are facing, of global warming and deforestation on one hand, and again on the social problems of increasing poverty and growing shanty towns. Shanty towns, yimikhukhu, ne? Shanty towns are your zozos. Shanty towns are your informal settlements, right? Yeah, so that's why it's just an American way of saying imikuku or the zozos or imichondolo, or yeah, guys, we are African, so get that out of
Zozo.
yeah, it's a zozo. It's a zozo. Yes. So yeah, so we have these problems. Guys, please don't focus on the zozo. Let's focus on the subject matter itself. So the point that is being stressed here is that we have increasing poverty and growing informal settlements, and we're saying that now when environmental problems, when ecological problems collide with social problems, we get a crazy kind of a crisis. So we get a large new scale of catastrophe, right? And this is very important for us to think of, because it is foregrounded at the approaches that we use or we want to employ in the management of environmental resources. So please think about this point. It's a very heavy code, very important for our understanding of the ecological crisis and environmental management. So because we have these problems, we have environmental ecological problems such as global warming, deforestation, and on the other hand we have problems of social problems in society such as poverty, informal settlements, people are homeless, and we say now we have a collide of these two problems, societal and natural problems, and that is causing this problem to be exacerbated beyond control. Hence, we have to study how to manage resources, because people that live in shanty towns have a minimal access to natural resources. Again, and the environment is not a healthy one, and they can't really manage the environment very nicely. So we'll look at places like Alexander, for example, here, opposite Sentin. So we can think about the crazy difference in how how clean Sentin is, one of the most prominent burbs in South Africa, and when you compare it to Alexander, which has existed from apartheid to date, and has always been an informal or shanty place. Yeah, and we see that there are deep entrenched societal problems that are there that also influence the quality of the environment, because we might know that next to Alexander we have a river called a fragment of Orange River. We know that a fragment of Orange River is Vaal River, and Vaal River has a tributary known as Ciskei River, and this tributary, of course, passes over Alexander, and the quality of the water there is very poor, immensely poor, because of the shanty towns that exist over the poor service delivery and all of it. So these social problems end up influencing or leading to some of the environmental problems that we end up having. Right, so I hope you understand that. So that's the point COVID is trying to make. Of course, the quote is made in reference to some of the large burning issues in our western and eastern countries, but they apply again here. So that's why I said take your time, write these things down, because I'm sure the reasons you wrote down are relative to your own experiences, what you know already about your country as well, in when it comes to resource environmental management. Okay, now let's just build up on this idea. Moreover, we have another doctor, Dr. Habeck, also predicts that the same Habeck we referred to earlier. He predicts that the combination of human-driven climate change and rapidly changing socio-economic conditions will set off a chain reaction of devastation leading to super disasters. So we already have normal natural disasters, but now they are getting exacerbated because of these socio-economic issues or conditions and that we face. And these socio-economic activities that we embark in also exacerbate the rate of, for example, releasing pollution, which leads to exacerbated global warming, ozone depletion, which leads to climate change. Climate change leads to an abnormal cycle of natural disasters. We get these super disasters that Dr. Habeck is making reference to. And we know that, again, if you look at people like places like the North Pole and the South Pole, we see that because of global warming, the glaciers or the ice there is melting down. And this leads now to loss of biodiversity for animals or wildlife that lives there. And on the other hand, it also leads to an increase in altitude, height above sea level. So the water is exasperatingly increasing for a short span of time. And that may lead to tsunamis in one place or another, because we have these glaciers, big icebergs, and breaking in an uncontrollable manner, and they end up leading to certain places being prone by earthquakes and natural disasters of that caliber as well for me. Okay, now going back to the quote. So he says that now current trends are putting millions more into the path of potential disasters. So 1 billion people are living in the world's unplanned shanty town. And think about it, we say that in the world we have roughly 7 billion people, and of the 7 billion, 1 billion approximately, and think about it, this was a statistic in 2007, think about the conditions now. Yeah. So we have even more people that live in shanty towns and unplanned places, and this now leads to even more breakdown into nature, leads to even more destruction into nature. And we say that 40 of the 50 fastest growing cities are located in earthquake zones. So because of overpopulation, we end up having people settling in the most dangerous places. And another 10 million live under constant threat of flood. So it goes back to this chain reaction that Dr. Habeck referred to, leads to catastrophic effects for humans themselves. Now it goes back to the quote in the previous slide that asserted that we need to now start thinking about the natural environment and society as one unit, because one influences the other. And unfortunately, it's human activities that deteriorate the environment, and the environment ends up deteriorating human life as well through natural disasters. People die. So I hope you understand the logistics behind it. Okay. Now, most important question then is that, okay, now that we've outlined the problem and answered why resource environmental management, what can we do about this? What can we do about the ecological crisis? I have a student here with me. Let's just hear what he thinks should be done. Remember, I had said earlier on, make a list of things that you think should be done in managing resources and the environment. So you can listen what he has to say, and also maybe pause the video and talk to yourself, talk to your screen, and just share what you think should be done with these problems. Of course, the mini essay that you have to write is also giving you a platform to share what you think should be done. And of course, the live session as well that we are going to have will also give you a platform for you to share what should really be done about the ecological crisis. So let's listen to the student.
It all goes back to a knowledge problem. Society lacks knowledge on the ecological and sociological aspect of this catastrophe that we're headed towards. With regards to global warming, when we're told about global warming, we don't really take that into consideration. We don't take into account the fact that it's the little things that cause this larger scale catastrophe. For instance, if we were taught, handle water in a way that would benefit us. For instance, also another example would be slow down cutting down trees, I'm sorry. So as I was saying, if we're able to really understand the effect of us cutting down trees faster than the earth being able to replenish the trees, it would be easier for us to much rather sustain trees and not face the problem of deforestation. Because what happens then, now we have to think outside the box. If deforestation occurs, now floods are more prone, because in the world of agriculture, trees prevent flooding. Also, we look at oxygen.
Yeah.
Deforestation also equates to a decrease in oxygen.
Yeah, and just to say something on the role of the trees, they act as windbreakers, and remember, when there is wind, we have to have the formation of precipitation. We look at the complexities of that in earth sciences, the next module. Yeah, so they act as windbreakers, which means they can actually prevent heavy rain that may lead to flooding from forming. Yeah, so I just felt it's important to also understand, as a geography teacher, when you say something, also detail how it happens. When you say trees may prevent floods. How? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I was looking at it from a point of landslides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, landslides in that
Landslides
aspect.
in that
Yeah.
aspect.
Okay, geography is so vast. Yeah. No,
It's vast.
Yeah.
Okay, we can also look at the glaciers. All right, melting of glaciers ultimately means a rise in water levels. Rise in water levels means people that reside in coastal areas are prone to flooding. Do you understand? So now the government has now to implement ways. And I'm not sure if you've seen this, if you've gone to the beach, there are sand walls. What are those walls called? Sandbags.
Yeah, they put sandbags around the place, and
that's not for recreational purposes.
Yeah.
That is for the protection of the people that reside. If you live in Camps Bay, wow, nice for you, ha ha ha. But you're
gonna die.
Yes,
you're gonna die.
You're prone to flooding, and it goes. Imagine this research was conducted in 2007. How catastrophic are the conditions now?
Now it's worse.
Much worse. Much worse. So I think these are the things that we should consider, and there are many more that I still need to explore. But yeah.
Okay, yeah. So thanks to the student, anonymous student, for for the reflections, yeah, and the reason why we're keeping it anonymous, so that the responses are gonna be relevant for the 2023 group as well of first years, as much as they were relevant for the group before this one, 2021 group. So I hope we are fine with it. So that's what he thinks can be done. As I said, pause the video and talk to yourself. What should be done about the ecological crisis? And guys, when I say pause the video, genuinely do that, because it's gonna help put perspective. Remember, inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning entails you using all the 5 E's. Engage with the work, explain the work, elaborate on it, evaluate it, and so on and so forth. So really think about the problem. The problem is that we have resource environmental depletion, which is what is summed up as the ecological crisis. So we need to know what to do about it. So also have your own reflection on what you think should be done about it. And if you're comfortable with everything, you can play the video again and continue with the lesson. Okay, so let's now look at a very different aspect. Remember, the question I asked is, what should we do about the ecological crisis? Now, for us to do something about the ecological crisis, we also need to think about ecological governance, environmental governance. How does it work? Now, I'm saying that it's an aspect that needs a lot of thinking. Apologies for the spelling error there. It needs thinking. So we need a lot of thinking involved or associated with that, because thinking is not a word, it's just for emphasis. So so we need a lot of thinking, and it's a special kind of thinking. So an improved ecological management system will help solve the problem. So that's like the reason that I'm sure you gave when you paused the video. It's oriented around that, to say we need to find more effective influential ways of governing the environment, managing the ecological system, right? And of course, that is guided by ecological thinking. And the question is, who does ecological thinking? And we say that it's largely led by people in power. And since it's done by people in power, you can think about who puts those people in power. So the matter gets even politicized, right? So you can ask the question, is ecological thinking or is environmental governance a political matter? And unfortunately it is. So since you put these people in power, you also need to check what are they saying about the management of the environment. What are they saying about ecological system management? So are they for ecological thinking or are they against it? So that's what you need to ask yourself. And yeah, do they apply ecological thinking? So now before we get to the complexity, what is ecological thinking? Now Colville 2007, pages 14 to 15, the same prescribed reading you got, he defines ecological thinking as one that requires that we see the world as an interconnected whole. So we see the world as an interconnected whole. Who makes that whole? Yeah. So the first thing is that we are part of that whole. So humans may make part of it. Now, so from this standpoint, so we are part of the whole to which we connect as natural creatures. So we are natural creatures, part of this ecological or this interconnected whole, whose relation to nature requires that nature be transformed. So that's what ecological thinking involves. First thing, we acknowledge that we are part of the world system, ecological system. Because remember, it's goes back to what Dr. Habeck said. It's made of us, society, and the natural environment. So it's made by an interconnected whole. And it says we are part of that whole as humans and as natural creatures, put it that way. And we also believe that nature should be transformed. We acknowledge that. Now, what does that mean? In other words, it means that our human nature is to be both part of the whole of nature and also distinguished from it by what we do to it. So as much as we want to transform nature, we also need to remember that we don't really form. We cannot always be in control. We also need to let nature be its own thing or person, if it makes sense. So we also need to acknowledge that, and it is evident in how we choose to transform nature. We need to do it in such a way that doesn't damage it. So that's what is involved with ecological thinking. So ecological thinking can, however, now get politicized. That's the problem. So it can get politicized, which may affect how people transform the environment and manage its resources. So that's like the major problem with this. People can politicize the matter and also affect how the environment and the resources are managed. And we're going to look at how has that happened over the years, how has that kind of thinking endured over time, and what can we genuinely do about it if there's anything we can do. Right. Okay, so I just wanted to explore the political aspect even more. So since I'm saying that ecological thinking, or even scholars are also saying ecological thinking can be politicized, which affects how people transform or manage resources. Now it means that politicians govern, as much as they govern society. Remember, where does society come from? It comes from the environment, or society resides in the environment. So it means that the politicians also govern the environment, because one may come and ask, why are you saying it's politicized? Are these politicians running the environment or humans? No, they're running humans, and those members of society reside in the environment, and it automatically means that these politicians govern the environment as well. Now, what is the problem with politicians governing environment? First thing is that politicians have their personal vendettas, they have their personal agendas, which may not entail ecological thinking. Politicians, as much as they have agendas, they are people, and people have personalities. And personalities of politicians play a role in what happens to the environment. So I've broken it into like 4 points. Yeah, but you can write it as one sentence to say that's the problem with politicians. They have hidden agendas, and because they are people, they have personalities, and because they have personalities, personalities will strike when it comes to how we choose to think ecologically and manage our environmental resources or address the ecological crisis. But again, now you are not a politician, you are a teacher, you are a person, or you are a member of society. Let's start there. Before you are a teacher, you're a member of society. So what is your role as a member of society? Now it goes back to something that the anonymous student said. The anonymous student said that as a member of society, your day-to-day little decisions also matter. They matter a lot. They matter when it comes to how you choose to manage resources and the environment. So as a member of society, you occupy the environment. That's why decisions about the environment matter so much. And as much as you occupy the environment, you use and make certain resources as well. Yeah. So if you make music, you are making a resource. But what kind of resource? You can pause and answer that. It's a human-made resource, right? Yeah. So you are a human, you make resources as well. And as much as one can say, no, I don't make music, but you use certain resources. The fact that you are seated wherever you are, listening to this video, watching it, you are using certain resources. That laptop is a plastic, and plastic is made from a natural resource. So let's start there, right? Yeah, so you use these resources as well. And now you may not be making environmental decisions at a large scale just as politicians. Because remember, politicians have that power. But as an individual, your day-to-day environmental decisions decide or show what you think and believe about the environment. And that's why your decisions will play a role at what happens to society at large, environmentally so. Okay, so I hope you understand that. Again, thinking about now your affiliation as a teacher as well. So we looked at it at a humanly perspective. So that humanly perspective comes to you before you look at it professionally. And again, it's something that you need to emphasize with your learners as well, to say you need to build that environmental or ecological thinking, ecological consciousness amongst your learners, so that they make calculated environmental ecological decisions, as these everyday decisions will influence what happens to broader society at large when it comes to the environment and its management, right? So your influence as a teacher is important. How is it important? Ideologically and in action. So you have the duty to ideologically shape how those learners that are going to sit in your classroom will think cognitively, engage with ecological thinking. You are expected to conscientize those learners with ecological thinking, pragmatic ecological thinking, that will enable for them to make calculated environmental, ecological, or resource environmental management actions. And you can do it two ways, as I said, ideologically, so what you teach, what you say, how you condition them, and again, in action, what you do as a teacher. So you need to be, for you to be able to do that, you need to be an environmentally conscious individual. So you need to conscientize yourself with how the environment is managed before you conscientize your learners, because it's your duty to do that. Be a conscientized, ecologically conscientized individual, so you are able to share these beliefs with your learners. So your beliefs or personal opinions regarding the environment will influence what and how you teach your learners. So it goes as far as, number one, do you eat meat or are you a vegetarian? Think about it. You can answer that. Do you eat meat or are you a vegetarian? If you're a vegetarian, you save the environment more than one who eats meat, because the one who eats meat leads to loss of biodiversity, and that's a problem for society. And I'm sure you're laughing at this one, because most of you love meat. Anyways, again, we also ask, do you buy bags every time you shop? Or do you, and by bags, guys, I mean plastic bags. Do you buy plastic bags or do you carry a shopper bag? Because remember, shopper bag can be reused over and over again when you go shop. So it goes as far as your personal life. Remember, we said you need to be an ecological conscientized individual. Yeah. Again, do you litter as a teacher? Do you throw papers on the floor or plastics or whatever? Or do you allow your learners to do so? So it goes back to your classroom. Is your classroom clean? Is your classroom surroundings clean? If it is clean, it means you are an ecological conscious individual. So you've conscientized yourself and you are conscientizing your learners as well into having a clean environment. Again, do you promote recycling in your classroom? Do you recycle as a teacher? Or yonke into pure wash, everything comes in? Yeah, it's rubbish, everything is thrown in one place. So are you a recycler? So it goes as far as that. Again, so that's your affiliation as a teacher into environmental management. So you see that you have a huge impact, because if you conscientize these learners into environmental management, they are able to be clean, not just in your classroom, in the school as well. And not just at the school, at home as well. Not just at home, it goes as far as their workplace. It goes as far as their university life. They're going to have the cleanest rooms. They're going to have very neat study places, because they are environmental conscious individuals. So your role plays, so it builds the kind of adults, because it will also be passed down to their kids. And yeah, so that's your role as a teacher. As much as you're not like a politician who can make legislative decisions, jurisprudential decisions that will influence what happens with environmental management, but you do have a hand when it comes to environmental management. Okay, now let's just come back a bit now to more theoretical frameworks. Why the question why, it comes a lot. Why do we have to manage environmental resources? Why? The first one can say it's a divine command. What does that mean? Divine command, it goes back to the Bible. It's biblical. Yeah, God said, be fruitful and many, take care of the earth, and subdue it. So the command said, take care of the earth. So that's what it means by that. It comes from that scripture to say, take care of the earth, make the entire earth an earthly paradise. Paradise is a clean place. You can look at an etymological definition of what a paradise is. So it's a clean place, safe space. Yeah, so one can say it's a divine command to take care of the environment and manage its resources. Again, logical people can come and say, no, it's necessary for us to take care of the environment because of scientific research, scientific study. So if you take care of the environment, it can stay longer. It can maintain more life for long. And it enables for us to understand the environment even better. Yeah. And another one is on the aesthetics level. So one would say beauty of nature enriches our lives, maintaining genetic diversity, bioengineering, recreational value. So it's an aesthetic one to say let's maintain nature, let's take care of the environment, to maintain diversity and be able to apply our technological advancements in making the earth to be even more aesthetically appealing for us, right? The next one is stability of ecosystem. If we take care of the environment, we have a stable environment, stable ecosystems. Economic gains in tourism. Think about it. Would you go on a tour to Alexandra?
It goes back to aesthetics.
Yeah, so it goes back to aesthetics, right? Yeah, so you wouldn't go there. Yeah, but would you go on a tour to Table Mountain? Yes. Yeah, but would you go to Table Mountain if it was polluted? No. What are you doing there? What are you doing there? Are you mad? Yeah, so it goes as far as that. So to say, do you uh, do you realize the economic gains of that come again with resource environmental management? So it goes back to this aspect to say nature and society coexist because we make money from nature through this. Okay, another one is there's a possibility of finding use for a resource in future, education for future generations. So if we keep certain resources, they can exist, or other future generations can find them there and be able to study them as you got a chance to. So it's an ethical basis and it's sustainable development. I'm sure you know this reason from high school social sciences. Sustainable development, to say, no, let's take care of the earth, um, not just for the now, but for also for future generations, right? And the last one is danger of unintentional impacts or side effects. So it's again another ethical one to say we don't know what will happen, we don't know what's coming, we don't know some of the side effects, and these side effects may affect us as humans. So we need to take care of the environment and its resources. Okay, so of course these are some of the reasons that were cited by Dr. Diane Long in Social Science 1 2020 VETS lecture slides. Okay. Okay, now that we know some of the reasons, I think it's important just for us to look at a brief historical inquiry into ecological thinking. How has it evolved over time? What influenced the changes in our understanding of how people interact with nature? Yeah, so what key historical times and events in the human race have led to the evolution of ecological thinking over time? So we look at the Middle Ages, what happened there in relation to the environment and the beliefs that existed at the time. We also looked at resonance. What is that? What does it involve? We also look at industrial revolutions. So what role do they play? Colonialism, the two world wars, civil rights movements, rise of technology, human rights and social justice, which is the modern day read. So we look at how has ecological thinking over time changed. So without wasting any time, let's just look at this evolution. Okay. Now, evolution of ecological thinking continued. Now, the first thing that we said we're going to look at is the Middle Ages. So that is like the 1400s to 1600s. So that's where we had like the great chain of being. Yeah, so the universe had a divinely planned order. So people lived on the divine command. So the role of the human chain was clear to say humans are made to take care of the earth. Goes back to the divine command to say make the entire earth a paradise. So you see that divine command. So people lived on that. They believed in that. That's why they took care of the environment. They were clean. So that's where religious knowledge was prominent. People lived on that as the sound reason for taking care of the environment. So now stewardship was born in that time. So stewardship is one of the world views. So stewardship of humans over nature, to say it is ethically and morally expected that humans take care of the environment. So that's what they thought of at the time. And we also talk about the next period after the Middle Ages, the Renaissance period. Now that's when scientific awakening started. So people started in being inquisitive. That's where philosophy started. People started saying, okay, where does the universe come from? What other sound reasoning can we use instead of religion to justify the origins of the universe? Yeah, and now people also started finding scientific and logical reasons for taking care of the environment, right? So people started using observation and reasoning. Oh, when we pollute water, we actually reduce the water quantity, the amount of water we're gonna have. That's just the point. That's the line of thinking that would be used. And people were intentionally rejecting the divine natural order to say take care of the earth just because it's biblically or religiously stipulated that it should be done. So there was glorification of human thought. So the thinking logic was more respected than anything. So that's when the scientific study of the natural world was born, and humans were at the center of the earth. So people saw that no, we are actually subduing the earth. And the diagram here shows exactly that. Yeah. So the circular part of it, that's the earth, and at the center of it we see that we have humans, and you see the symbolism of a lady and a man. So that's human. So people felt, no, we are at the center of the earth. The earth existed is dependent on us, and we can really do anything that our minds can put themselves to. So that's this kind of reason that was given. Resonance pure.
So it was the awakening. So this was the awakening of humans. And they realized that not everything depends on the divine God.
Yes. Yeah, so that's the period. That's the awakening of people. So that's when people started moving from being reactionary beings to being human beings or intelligible beings, acknowledging that there is logic that can be used instead of religion to explain some things. Yeah, so that's that. And then we also have industrial revolution. Next one. So that's where the steam engine was born. Steam power, pumping of water. Water was used. Remember, water is a natural resource. Mining, transport was born at that time. Remember, they used to use cows and sheep and camels and all of these goats. Okay, not goats. Yeah, but you get what I mean. These domesticated animals that could transport stuff. Yeah, so that was the growth of industries, and mechanization started improving. So now this rapid increase in industrial revolutions led to a higher demand for natural resources. And remember, these industries created a lot of waste. So that's where like our ecological problem really started. These industries created waste, and this waste deteriorated its ecological systems. And of course, it wasn't realized when this was formed. It was seen as, oh, intellectual power is coming to the hand. And it's leading to these crazy advancements that make human lives even easier. So that's the significance of the era. So you see, more resources started being used, and on the side of things, waste was produced, destroying environment. Hence, we have to manage it. So there was overuse of resources. Remember, the module is resource and environmental management, and there was waste produced, which made us want to manage the environment. Okay. And then on the side, during colonialism, number one, there was a spread of Christianity, and specifically Christianity that we call Christendom. Yeah, so it's questionable Christianity. And there was a spread of Western civilization. So Western civilization principles started spreading, and their industries also started spreading these industrial zones and all. There was a development of poverty. So remember I said earlier on that once we have social issues, they influence the quality of the environment, right? And there was exploitation and unfair trade relations. Yeah, so people started exploiting these resources. So ownership of natural resources and the supply of raw materials and cheap labor was the most common thing at the time during colonialism times. Of course, poverty meant people are not really ecologically educated. They don't apply ecological thinking, and it meant the environment was deteriorated. And we can see that money was perpetuated. So development, industrial development was done, and in return for cheap labor, which meant more people started living in shanty towns and meant the environment got deteriorated. And of course, these people were working with raw materials, so it means the demand for raw material is even higher. So if you look at the map here, it's a map of colonial Africa, and it's showing which countries colonized where, right? Which sections of Africa. And it's a problem even in the modern day that has endured over time. Okay, but we're not there. Yeah. So another one is the World War. So World Wars also led to even more issues. Of course, World Wars were perpetuated by national superiority. So people will fight just to check, man, we are the strongest country. And then this one, no, you can't defeat us. And then people start bombing each other and they will die. And in the process, some were fighting for resources themselves. So some industries created weapons. And in the process of weaponry creation, there was a lot of pollution and waste production that resulted. So again, in the wars, there were resource shortages. Some people would die of hunger, for example, because of these wars. Yeah. So preservation and conservation started being born at this time, because remember, these are just some of the things people saw. Okay, if we're gonna be in war in the wilderness and it's dry, we need to find ways to preserve certain resources so we still have food in these regions we at. So these principles were born during the world wars. Yeah, there is Hitler there. Okay, and then on the side we also have the space race time, which is like the 1960s. So that's where we started having the Cold War. For starters, guys, the Cold War, it doesn't mean it's a war that happened when it was cold. It's just an intellectual war. So no one died in the war. It was just an ideological war where there was a ideological fight between is capitalism or communism the best way to govern these black colonized countries. So that was just the war. And now, what's more significant about these times is that it's called the space race because the first man landed on the moon. So technological dominance was really good at this time, right? So we had our first picture. We had our first picture of the Earth viewed from space, and that's the picture attached this side on the slide here in the bottom right corner. So that's the space race. And then we also have now the rise of civil rights movements. So we had people like Rosa Parks. You're gonna learn about Rosa Parks next year when you do USA history. The module is called Ways of Belonging, from Columbus to the civil rights movement. So we are going to be looking at these civil rights movements. Rosa Parks' most famous speech by Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, or it is Martin Luther King. Yes, the speech on I Have a Dream. We also have Rivonia treason trial in South Africa. There were a lot of protest action happening. Now, this protest action was fighting certain things. It was against anti-racism, challenging the undeserved privilege, social justice issues, civil solidarity. So now that's the age where we started seeing how the social really influences the environmental. So that's when people started going for social justice. And the process of social justice involved land, aspects of land. And when people fought for land, it was purely out of civil consciousness, which was sprouted by certain ecological things to say, why are we living in an area with less resources while these ones live in an area with more resources? So it got to that level. People ideologically debated these issues, right, that came with the time. So that's the rise of civil rights movement, period. So in essence, in summary, what this is teaching us is that over time, ecological thinking was influenced by these big moments in time. And you see that all of these moments in time either had something to do with the resources or the environment, or both. So it's always been like that. And that's how the world views were born. Now we have 4 world views, of course, that we'll be focusing on or paying attention on. The first world view is the stewardship view. Take care of the environment because it's the right thing to do, morally right thing to do. We also have the planetary management view. It's very technocentric in nature. No, we can manipulate the environment. We have the tech to make our own resources. No, you can finish that water. We can get water from the ocean and remove the salt from it using technology and still have water.
What's the process called?
So we have that.
What is it?
And then we also have the earth wisdom view. Again, it's now oriented around conserving the environment. And we also have the radical or structural, the radical or structuralist view, which is more or less oriented around social justice, as we go for environmental justice as well. As much as we want social justice, also go for environmental justice. So all of the views are oriented around resource and environmental management. So I want us to then, of course, look at each of them. What does it entail, one by one? Okay, so the first view that we look at is the stewardship view. Now, the stewardship view is based on certain assumptions that we just need to think about. The first one is that people that hold this view on managing resources and the environment believe that we need to manage resources and the environment simply because nature is sacred to humans, and because of this, humans have to just respect nature. So it's an ethical view to resource and environmental management. They also believe that nature should be protected from human exploitation. So this view is basically ecocentric, so it's oriented around the protection of the ecological systems or the environment and the resources themselves. I also believe that people should not waste the resources of earth, but they should use them respectfully. So it's oriented around pure respect of the environment and environmental resources, and they also recognize that rights, all forms of life have certain rights, including future generations, to say let's preserve environmental resources not just for us now but for future generations as well. And then we also have the planetary management view. Now this view, in this view, people believe that human beings are the planet's most important dominant species, and because of this, if we manage the environment, we are doing it for our own benefit. So it is basically saying that let's protect the environment because the environment is of benefit to us as the species. So let's just protect it if it is of value. So it goes back to resources. They're protected simply because they're of value to us. And they also believe that people's successes depend on how well they understand, control, and manage its life support systems. So how successful you become is basically oriented around are you environmental conscious? Are you ecological conscious to apply ecological thinking? How to control or manage some of the Earth's life systems? Are you using them consciously or not? And they also believe that then on the side, technology will give us ways to using our resources efficiently. So they hold the technocentric view that says that if we deplete certain resources, we can just use technology to produce new ones. So that's just their view. And we also believe in economic growth. So we say that economic growth is practically limitless. So why not? Why restrict people from using certain resources just because we feel it's ethically viable for us to do that? So they feel that economic growth is something that we cannot stop. So we should go beyond the bounds of that to try and protect our environment. And something important is bolded, of course, that to say humans have a utilitarian relationship with the environment. To say we utilize environmental resources, and because we utilize them, we have to protect them. So it holds that view to say yes, we use tech, but in as much as we depend on tech as an alternative solution to solving problems, but we need to protect the environment because we hold that utility dependent kind of a relationship to the environment. So I hope that makes sense. next view that we talk about is the earth wisdom view. Now, the earth wisdom view basically says that humans are part of nature and should work with natural processes. So that's like the first assumption. We are part of nature and we should work with natural processes. Now, working with, that's the key word, with, not against natural processes. Now, we have a problem now in society where people work against natural resources, and hence we have this ecological crisis, and we have to now manage our resources and environment as a result. Okay, and we also have another one that says natural resources exist for the benefit of all Earth species, including human. So if we ethically accept that, we are gonna use these resources wisely, and we are not gonna waste them. So they're not gonna be wasted, right? And this view also encourages economic growth that does not cause environmental degradation. So it allows to say, yes, economic growth is limitless, but as much as it's limitless, we can actually perpetuate economic growth that does not cause environmental degradation, which is a very important aspect for us to think about. And this view is ecocentric, so it's oriented around protecting the environment, really. It's not technocentric as the planetary wisdom view, of course. The next one is that we need to use resources sustainably. So you'll remember that at high school they taught you about sustainable development. So using resources, perpetuating economic and social development while not compromising the environment. So that's sustainable development. And of course, this view comes from the spaceship Earth times, right? Okay, and then we have the fourth view, the radical or structuralist view. Now, this view holds the perspective that the environment includes the conditions under which we live and work. So the environment includes the conditions under which we live. So this is more socially oriented to say, yes, humans exist within the environment. And this environment is inclusive of where people will live or where they work. Now, it continues to say that different communities have had unequal access to environmental resources and environmental consequences. So it is largely oriented around a sociological concept we call stratification, to say there is a lot of inequalities in society. That those inequalities, of course, can be racially based. We are going to explore this radical structuralist view in terms of environmental justice, and that's why the next week we're just doing environmental justice without mixing it with other views, because it's quite a complex socio-political section of work or approach to, or view rather, radical or structuralist view to managing resource and environment. Now, it also assumes that inequalities often is as a result of political injustices. So it goes back to the past to say, now there is something that we call environmental goods and environmental bads. To say some people may get environmental goods, they get access to environmental resources, but you find that people in other communities, they don't have access to environmental goods. But the problem now is that they get access to environmental bads, and what does that mean? They get access to consequences of the environmental goods. I can make a simple example. There are communities that live next to mines, right? Now, those communities that usually live next to mines, they don't really benefit from the mine or from the minerals mined in that particular region. So, but there's something they benefit from. They get what we call environmental beds. Now, people that live in the suburbs, in these prominent areas, are the ones that will benefit from the environmental goods, being the minerals. But now the consequences of them getting the minerals are not faced by them because they don't live in that mining region. They live far away from that. It's communities that live next to the mine that will get the environmental beds, they will get the environmental consequences that will come with regards to that. So the radical and structuralist view says, no, we need to address that. We need to take care of that. We need to be cognizant of the fact that we don't live, the environment and humans don't exist fragmented from each other. They are dialectically interdependent. Face it. Yeah. And it goes back to another point to say now, if we overconsume things from the environment, this is something that is deemed as unethical. So it's not based on sound reasoning, right? And it also now assumes that those who live in poverty disproportionately forced are disproportionately forced into marginal lands. So they're taken to these lands that have environmental problems. And why does that happen? It goes back to that the inequalities that exist, social stratification lead to that. So some people end up being placed at unconducive environments, and they are now prone to environmental problems. So the view, in essence, just assumes that nature is a site of struggle. So there are big problems associated with the natural environment. That's just a view we hold from this perspective. So it's a site for struggle, and this struggle has to be addressed if we are to move as society. So those are the four views. Maybe take 5 minutes again, one more time, and just think about which view of the four do you resonate with. After 5 minutes, you can play the video, and now let's just look at how are each of the views applied into the different approaches that we use in managing our resources. So think about which view do you resonate with from the four, and just share with us with regards to that. So I am going to ask our anonymous student to share with us which view he resonates with and why.
Okay, we should look. I resonate more with the radical view, because if we look at the most typical example here, mines. If you look at mining tycoons, they live up in the suburbs. They're comfortably, and they're unaffected. Whereas you look at the people working for these mining tycoons, they reside near these mining regions and they face the brunt. Why is this? It's because, for instance, if we look at environmental disadvantages, mines pollute the rivers that run across.
Those are environmental beds, ne?
Yeah, those are environmental
beds. That is a concept. Please use that concept. Yeah.
The communities that reside around the mine face the brunt of the environmental bads of water pollution, and that's terrible. If we look at it from an economical point of view, first of all, the miners don't get paid a lot of money. They're unable to support their families, and they're expected to go back there and work despite living in those undesirable conditions. So it goes back to inequality, you ask yourself why this happens. The answer would be because you did not go to school. But is that fair? Is that fair for a human being to now live in such conditions? It goes back to the ethical question of who decides how the standard of living of a person. They go down there in those mines and they work really hard to get 2,000 rand, for instance, while facing so much trauma based on environment and looking at
what should be done about the problem. I mean, said a lot of issues. What should be done?
At this point, I don't want to lie. I don't know. Some research needs to be done, but I'm sure I'll have answers by the end of this block.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So that's the question we asked. That's the question we're really here for, to say, okay, these are the issues we've identified, and yeah, probably some of you have they resonate with the Earth Wisdom view or the planetary management view or the stewardship view. Either ways, just give us sound reasoning why you resonate with it. And of course, you are expected to be writing mini essays on that, so I'll be interested to just read some of your responses with regards to that. And unfortunately, you'll be asked the question, so after raising the problem as an academic, what should be done? Yeah, so as an ecological thinker, what do you think should be done to address those problems? Yeah, so yeah, that's just that. We can move on then to the approaches. Now, approaches to managing resources in the environment. It's quite a short section because it's basically an overview of what you're going to be doing for the rest of the block. So we are going to be looking at different approaches to managing resources in the environment. And these approaches are based on the world views that we discussed, right? Now, you must understand approaches to managing resources in the environment are different from the world views to managing resources in the environment. So a world view is a dialectical thought. It's a train of thought. It is different from an approach, because an approach is the way, the practicality, fragment of things. How do you practically ensure that your views come with actions to come to fruition? That's what it means. Yeah, so with the planetary management view, remember this is a technocentric view, as we discussed. So this view is associated with the approach called free market environmentalism. And what is free market environmentalism says? It says that property rights and free trade make the environment an asset rather than a liability. So they're saying that you should privatize the environment, make it an asset, earn money from it, instead of making it a liability. So what does that mean? It means that people should buy certain pieces of land, give ownership to certain people as an incentive for ensuring that they manage that environment. So it's quite a capitalist perspective to managing resources in the environment. Let's just privatize land and make people buy the land. And of course, when they've bought the land, just put some laws to make them take care of that environment that they bought. Yeah, so that's just a view. That's how you manage resources in environment, free market environmentalism in assets. And then we also have conservation. Conservation is from the worldview called stewardship. Now, this view says protect the environment because it's the right thing to do. It simply says that. So it's based on ethics, ethical use of resources, allocation and protection of resources from exploitation in order to maintain the health of the natural world, its fisheries, habitats, and biological diversity. So it just says protect the environment because it's the right thing to do. And when we've done that, we are able to avoid exploitation of resources. So rather we protect them, allocate them appropriately in order to maintain the health of the natural world, its fisheries, habitats, and biological diversity. So that's what the view just says. Yeah, so I hope it's clear. We are going to be looking at this view, of course, in week 2 of our sessions, looking at both of the view: free market, environmentalism, and conservation. So make sure before you attend the session, we have to recap and just look at this briefly again. And we are going to be looking at in detail what do we mean by putting property rights, what do we mean by free trade, what does it mean to make an environment as an asset instead of a liability, what incentives can we put in place, right? Free trade is one of the incentives we talk about. How do we avoid overfishing, as an example? Yes, those are just some of the perspectives that we put in place to try and manage resources and the environment, effectively. Okay, so that's just that. Then let's look at some more. So another approach is called sustainable development. You did this a lot in high school, from grade 6 to grade 11. Did the sustainable development a lot. And you also look at aspects of social justice in grade 12 when you are looking at land reform, right? But here with sustainable development, it's based on two views together. It's based on the earth wisdom view and the stewardship view, right? So these views, of course, hold the view that economic development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs is the best way to manage environmental resources. So that's just what the view is saying. And of course, it's based on an ethical basis to say, no, the future generations deserve to have access to this resource as much as we did, right? So let's take care and conserve our environmental resources for that. So that's sustainable development. And then with environmental justice, on the other hand, this is based on the radical and structuralist view. So that says that there are inequalities, a social stratification problem, and these inequalities need to be addressed. And one of the grounds of addressing that is from earth wisdom view to say it's ethics. Do it because it's the right thing to do, right? Now, environmental justice says that nature is a site of struggle and there is a need to be fair about the distribution of resources so that everyone benefits. So it supports in protecting the environment, but it also supports doing that in order to allow for growth, environmental growth. So that's just the view. Protect the environment so that we also protect our people and vice versa. So that's just environmental justice. It's based on that assumption. Of course, you can read more on what radical structuralist view entails. You can just go back to that fragment of the video, the lesson, and earth wisdom view to just look at what are the logistics associated with each of the four. So those are the four approaches we have that we are going to be studying. Remember, we're studying FME, free market environmentalism, environmental conservation. In week 2, in week 3, we are studying environmental justice. In week 4, we're studying sustainable development as per the outline. In conclusion, in this session, we covered the following. What is the best approach to studying resources and the environment? And we established that inquiry-based learning and problem-based learning are the best approaches to studying resources and environmental management. And we emphasize that you can use this strategy for your own pre-service teacher development, most important for your own teaching of this section as a teacher at a school, right? And then we also explored an inquiry into what resources are and what the environment is. And we also looked at, okay, now that you know what resources are and what the environment is etymologically and descriptively so, we looked at what is then the ecological resource crisis. Why do we have to protect resources and the environment? Why do we have to manage the two? So we saw that we have an ecological crisis that needs ecological thinking for it to be addressed. We also looked at the different role, distinctly and complementary, that a politician can play versus a teacher in the redress of the management of resources and in the environment. We then looked at how has, in the epistemic sense, how has ecological thinking evolved over time, and how has it defined some of the key historical moments of our time and before our time. And we also looked at the different world views when it comes to environmental management. We looked at stewardship, we looked at planetary management view, we looked at earth wisdom view, and we also looked at radical and structuralist view. Those are the 4 world views. And we said all of the 4 make up the 4 approaches into managing resources and the environment. So we looked at the 4 approaches: free market environmentalism, environmental conservation, sustainable development, environmental justice. The 4 approaches. And we said, of course, they make up what we do in this module, and we're gonna explore each of them in each of the remaining 3 weeks of the course. Okay, so that brings the session's content to the end. If there are fragments you don't understand, feel free to email me. I am gonna share my email at the end of this. All of the information or the knowledge and all that has been covered in this session has been sourced from these academic resources, so you can check all of them out when you work with your essays and your academic writing, depending on whether VETS gives you an assignment that is in essay format or a quiz, of course. Yeah, and of course for this section, just one more thing, you are expected to do some mini essays, so you may have to just go and read some of these readings yourself, and remember to source only relevant stuff to this. Okay, and then let's just cover administrative work announcements. So for week 1, you are given a quiz as an assessment. You're expected to do your quiz within or rather by the stipulated due date. You're also expected to go to the folders tab and access week 1 readings. It's an article by Covell, and it is on the ecological crisis, so please do that reading before you attempt that quiz. In week 2, you are going to be prescribed a mini essay. You're expected to do that mini essay by the stipulated due date. You should have gone through the readings as well that are found in the week 2 folder for you to be able to do that. It has to be reference people, APA referencing style with a referencing list. If you do not do that, you are subject to disciplinary action, of course, for plagiarism, and maybe deregistered from the program. And then just talk about live sessions. Please use the timetable time. The live sessions are gonna be Tuesdays, 7 to 9. Subject to us making any changes. Please just check out Umthombo Wolwazi for any announcements with regards to that. But live sessions are Tuesday 7 to 9. Okay, and then how do you send inquiries? So this is the team for the module. The senior instructor for the module is Mr. Mbuyisa, myself. My email is psi.petermbuyisa@gmail.com, and the next instructor after me will be Mr. Mbata, and his email is psi.edudev.mbilombata@gmail.com. The course coordinator is Mr. Mbata as well, same email as aforementioned. And the head of division for the social science division is Mr. Dibane. His email is psiunitat.johndibane@gmail.com. Now, if you have queries with regards to content assessment and all, you contact me, Mr. Mbuyisa, the instructor involved. If you have any issues with regards to marks and you're not happy about feedback and all, please contact Mr. Mbata. He can organize for a remark if he deems necessary. Contacting him doesn't automatically mean we're gonna entertain whatever you're saying. It has to be based on sound reason. If you can't attend a session, you need to email your leave form found on the folders tab to Mr. Mbata as well. Again, if you're requesting an extension, remember you can ask for that once a block, and requesting one doesn't automatically mean it will be granted, subject to the reasons you give us. So you also do that from the coordinator, Mr. Mbata. And if both of us can address your issues, you can forward the matter to the head of division, Mr. Dibane. And if Mr. Dibane can address the issues, you can forward the matters to the Chief of Academic Affairs in the PSI Educator Development Program Executive Management Team, Mr. Makua. His email is chiefofacademicaffairs@gmail.com. Yeah, PSI Unitat Chief of Academics @gmail.com. I think that's the correct one. Yeah, so just source it again from the general updates platform that we use. And then if all the people can address your issues, please forward them to the Vice Director, Mr. Dibane. So if you contact him at HOD level, yeah, and he can't, you will have to go via academics and you will get to the directory office, of course. Yeah. You are not allowed to contact the director on any issues at all. Please, minimize me. Thanks for watching. See you in class on Tuesday. I hope the session helped you guys, and I hope you didn't sleep through the session. Continue being good environmentalists and taking care of nature. See you in class. Mr. Mbuyisa is signing out. Bye-bye.